Chapter 14. Chapter 14. Kurt Olson Stalks Tony Taffy. Kurt Olson awoke to the sound of a roaring lion emanating from his cell. "Yes, sir," he replied, fully aware that Leo had pre-programmed Kurt's voice to sound like Shirley Temple at the other end of the conversation. The G. Gordon Liddy voice wasted no time on greetings. "According to your GPS, you are in your room at a motel whose name we will not speak, but I can no longer track your target's beacon. Why is that?" "I don't know, sir. I secured it in the way the instructions—" "Did you secure the beacon in accordance with the instructions provided?" "Yes, sir, I did. I don't think it fell off because—" "Because why?" "Because it seemed to be turned off, sir." Leo Kelly paused before responding. "Maybe it got smashed by an 18-wheeler. Ever think of that?" "It's a possibility, sir. But if the instruction manual is reliable—" "Don't talk to me about reliability, you buffoon. Are you capable of completing this mission?" "Yes, sir." "You are a stone's throw from the target's residence, and eventually he will spend a night there." "I hope so, sir." "For your sake, I hope so, too. I want you to make hourly checks at his residence after the sun goes down." "Yes, sir." "And if he comes home, I expect you to finish the job." "Yes, sir." "It's you or him, jackass. You or him." "Yes, sir." "I'll be in touch." He severed the connection before Kurt Olson could respond. Kurt Olson sat on the bed and took a deep breath. The room still smelled strongly of oil-based bug spray. More oil than pesticide, but enough of each to maximize nausea. The odor bothered Kurt Olson, but did not seem to bother the multitude of roaches who occupied every crack and crevice of the room. The trip had cleared some cobwebs from Kurt Olson's head. It started out on a sour note when he discovered that the vehicle Leo Kelly had procured for him was another white Nugo. Same make and model as Kurt Olson's, but with less wear and tear and not quite as much rust. Kurt Olson imagined his supervisor got a chuckle over that one. It had been years since Kurt Olson had been anywhere other than work and home and the occasional family visit. He had enjoyed the countryside on his drive to Mississippi, especially the hills of Tennessee and Virginia. He listened to an audiobook called The Turner Diaries that Owen had sent him last Christmas. It wasn't a bad story, but Kurt Olson could not understand why the author had it in for the Jews. When was the last time a Jewish street gang shot up a neighborhood? What had the Jews ever done to anyone? Still, the story held Kurt Olson's interest, and he promised his brother he would keep an open mind on the subject. All virtual plantation options were left behind so as to not run the risk of mesmerization. This was a business trip, Kurt Olson reminded himself. He did, however, take along a stack of Carter Brown novels, the only writer he ever enjoyed reading. Danny Boyd was always so cool. He liked to tell the audience how tough he was. No neuroses, no introspection. Kurt Olson would probably have read all of Carter Brown's work had not virtual plantation been invented. Of course, most of the time Kurt Olson pursued his target. Tony Taffy owned a condo on the outskirts of Starkville, but he did not usually sleep there. He usually slept at his office, and when he did so, he would park his car in a lighted, guarded parking garage in downtown Starkville. The garage had video security, and if that wasn't enough, his reserved parking spot was a toad hop from the guard shack. Kurt Olson's plan was to plant the contraband, a pound of highly diluted methamphetamine, in the trunk of Taffy's BMW when he parked at his condo. Kurt Olson would wait until dark. He would then use his universal remote entry to pop the trunk, and if that didn't work, he would use he would use his almost universal BMW key to pop the lid. Once the pound was tossed inside, he would call Leo Kelly immediately and deliver a coded message. Leo would complete the circuit by placing the call that would direct the local K9 unit to the Rookery condo complex, where a dog would alert its handler of something noteworthy in the trunk of Tony Taffy's Beamer. Kurt Olson completed the first part of the mission by slipping into the garage while the guard was sleeping and attaching the magnetic beacon behind the license plate. He had worn a cheesy beard, an Ole Miss hat, and dark glasses in case video footage became an issue in the future. But then the beacon suddenly stopped working and Kurt Olson was back at square one. Kurt Olson had returned to the parking garage a few times, but the snoozing guard was not there. One of the replacements did calisthenics and wind sprints. A pretty brunette guard had a constant stream of visitors from local on-duty police. One sentinel even parked his pickup truck next to the Beamer and spent a lot of time sitting in the cab, talking on his cell and listening to music. Kurt Olson resigned himself to catching Tony Taffy while he was parked at his condo. Around 4 p.m. on a Thursday evening, Kurt Olson hit pay dirt. He had bounced the Nugo through the Rookery's trail with speed bumps for the third time today. No matter how slow he coasted, the low-setting, bump-sensitive Nugo dragged bottom and left a trail of rust and sediment. But the punishment of the Nugo paid off handsomely. Tony Taffy was parked in his designated spot. All Kurt Olson had to do now was to wait until dark, when he could artfully conclude his mission. Kurt Olson came as close as one can to racing the Nugo and settled at Fry by Night Burgers and Dogs. There he ordered a Mississippi extravaganza. 2 fried peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with a fried pickle and a side order of fries and onion rings, washed down with an extra large Mountain Dew. Fry by Night did not have a drive-thru. Customers ordered from a screen window and picked up their order at another screen window. They would either take the package home or dine in a nearby screened area full of picnic tables. The more daring could dine at outdoor picnic tables chained to tall cypress trees. Feeling adventurous, Kurt Olson dined in the great outdoors. There he watched pubescent girls bus and clean the picnic tables. He thought about how little he missed Virtual Plantation. There were other things in life, things he had forgotten about, like food, for instance. Although he was mortally obese and Leo Kelly sometimes called him lardass, Kurt Olson had discovered that his weight stabilized during Virtual Plantation marathons. He didn't lose weight during prolonged sprees, but he didn't gain weight either. The game was so captivating that he never felt hungry. Besides, his hands were tied up with the keyboards, the touchpad, and the Waldo, and he went into first-person mode whenever one of his slaves went into battle. His mouth was often barking out voice commands as well. He had forgotten what it was like to enjoy fine dining and to savor every morsel of fine cuisine and relish every sip of Mountain Dew. Kurt Olson did not want to leave Fry by Night. He enjoyed the quaint paper straws that broke and made the Mountain Dew taste funny. He enjoyed the giggly teenagers with their sappy perfume and peppermint skirts. He loved the smell of fried lard and the pageantry of pigeons and sparrows and crows scrambling for crumbs. Kurt Olson pulled himself away from his feast and fired up the Nugo. He still had an hour until sundown, so he swung by the right food store, and there he purchased a bag of marshmallows, a package of Oreos, a couple of candy bars, and a roll of duct tape. Back at the Sawmill Lodge, Kurt Olson filled a plastic bag with ice, the Mountain Dew, and the candy bars inside, knowing the ice would keep the roaches away from the food products. He thought about placing the plastic bag inside the broken refrigerator, but ruled it out because it smelled funny and there were too many dead roaches inside. He left the ice bag on top of his dresser and then suspended 2 strips of duct tape from the ceiling. He delicately cut a strip in the top of the marshmallow bag and gently draped the bag upright, suspended from the ceiling. He considered doing something similar with the Oreos, but he was afraid the package would rip. He decided instead to transfer the Oreos to small sandwich bags, and when he completed this procedure, he had 1 bag of marshmallows and 6 Ziploc bags full of Oreos hanging from the ceiling of the cramped motel room. Kurt Olson hoped that these countermeasures would keep his food supply free of opportunistic roaches. It was getting dark, and Kurt Olson gunned the Nugo's sewing machine engine over to the Rookery condominiums. Even at 2 miles per hour, the Nugo slammed over the speed bumps and bit into the asphalt, leaving trails of rust and oil and corroded metal. After once more running the asphalt gauntlet, the Nugo coasted into the Pelican lot. Bad news. Taffy's Beamer was gone. Exiting the condo complex, Kurt Olson tried skirting the lawn as much as possible to avoid the bone-jarring speed bumps, but the management had placed concrete blocks close to the road to prevent drivers from doing just that. The Nugo endured another round of punishment, and Kurt Olson decided to outwait Tony Taffy at Hooker's ice cream shop. Most of Hooker's customers used the drive-through and takeout options, but Kurt Olson wanted a banana split, so he sat at one of the 2 uneven dining room tables that were set up in the receiving area. Kurt Olson had not eaten a banana split in about a decade, and he decided to make the most of the visit. Jumbo banana, Neapolitan ice cream, extra whipped cream, nuts, sprinkles, and 3 cherries on top. He tried to think of matters not related to Virtual Plantation, but his mind always wandered back to the subject. In the campaign recently consigned to the archives, Kurt Olson had matched his beloved Obadiah against first other fighters, and then he pitted him against an English Mastiff. His loyal combatant generated a lot of revenue for Olson Wood until the master overmatched him against 2 Irish wolfhounds. The real-time Kurt Olson grieved more strongly than he had expected for the loss of his champion, and he pledged to be more protective of his assets the next time around. "You want a second one?" A shrilled voice, fat woman, a starched blue and yellow uniform inquired ever so cheerfully. Kurt Olson snapped out of his dream. "No, ma'am," he replied, and walked away from the table. Stepping into the warm night air, Kurt Olson refocused on the task at hand. He strolled out to the Nugo and plopped down on the torn vinyl seat that expelled a flume of rotted foam rubber. Kurt Olson turned on the ignition and ignored the engine light. Hooker's was located on a busy commercial highway 1/8 mile from Birdland Drive, the access road to the Rookery condominiums. The Nugo retraced the path it had worn with a faint trail of rust and oil. Kurt Olson winced on each successive bump, and he realized that the Nugo could not make the trip too many more times. The Pelican Building, the last of 8 units in a string of 3-story buildings, contained Tony Taffy's home. Creeping into the parking lot, Kurt Olson's eyes grew large. The Beamer was back. Kurt Olson idled the Nugo for a moment in reverse course for what he hoped would be the Nugo's last excursion down the familiar trail. Back at the Sawmill Lodge, Kurt Olson flipped on the light, and the cumulative patter of thousands of roach feet drummed a faint noise that sounded like drizzle on a window pane. Hurriedly, he threw on his latex gloves, his riding gloves, his fluorescent riding uniform, and a black bike helmet. He urinated and then lifted the triple-wrapped pound of meth from the bathroom floor and stuffed it under his tight-fitting jersey. Kurt Olson slipped back into the unlit parking lot, locking the door behind him. He popped the trunk of his Nugo and removed the mountain bike he had procured before leaving Virginia. He checked the tires and briefly reviewed the mission. "It's showtime," he said aloud. It was only a couple of miles to his destination, but Kurt Olson was soon winded. He remembered when he was a couple of 100 pounds lighter and he could pedal once or twice and then coast for 100 feet. Now it was a struggle to move. About halfway to the target, Kurt Olson jumped off his bike and walked along a narrow gravel shoulder as sedans and minivans and pickups whisked by him. Kurt Olson had not noticed the slight incline when he was in the Nugo. Now, however, he was acutely aware that Perkins Pike rose sharply as it approached Birdland Drive. Kurt Olson was sweating and panting as he remounted his bike. At the mouth of Birdland Drive, Kurt Olson slowly pedaled down the dimly lit road. He was able to easily swerve around the speed bumps. He passed the 7th building, the Blue Heron, and coasted into a bosky plat. Parking his bike behind a large tree, he removed his fluorescent garment and turned it inside out. It was now wetsuit black. He donned a pair of large sunglasses and wrapped a black scarf around his neck. He removed the outer 2 layers of wrapping from the pound of meth. The outer plastic contained his sweat, and he did not want to leave a biological trail back to his doorstep. He removed an untouched by human hands kitchen bag from his saddle seat and gently placed the single wrapped bag inside it, careful to not drip sweat on the contraband. Kurt Olson was ready to plant the dagger. The final steps went as smoothly as Kurt Olson had hoped for. Kurt Olson did not want to use his almost universal electronic door opener because it would open the doors and trunks of nearby cars and would probably set off a few alarms as well. As a first option, he slid his almost universal Beamer key into the trunk and it opened instantly. He had carried the meth in his left hand and now he dropped it into the trunk, still careful to not sweat on the outer plastic. Kurt Olson slammed the trunk and walked 20 feet to his parked bike. He wasted no time in calling Leo Kelly and mouthing "Mission accomplished" in the Shirley Temple voice Leo had remotely programmed into his phone. Leo Kelly muttered 10-4 and hung up. Kurt Olson rolled back to the wooded lot to once more reverse his outerwear. He was soon back on Birdland Drive as a Mississippi Highway Patrol canine vehicle passed him going in the other direction. He did not wait around to see where it might stop. Even with the incline and the wind now in his favor, Kurt Olson still needed a rest about a half-mile from the Sawmill Lodge. There, he pulled into a Waffle World and dined on a stack of waffles with corn syrup, extra bacon, and a large Mountain Dew. A justified celebration. Kurt Olson slept well that night. The cumulative patter of roach feet was now part of a comforting atmosphere. It was over. Mission accomplished. It looked like Master Olson would soon be returning to his plantation and the warm embraces of his many loves.